Hello everyone, welcome to a new booktube video. This is very different as you can probably see, but it was my birthday yesterday and I wanted to try something different, and I've had this idea of recording my videos in nature for a while now, and so I just want to try. Um, yeah, so today I have a very personal video that I want to share with you, and that is books that changed my life. And I know that sounds very dramatic and very exaggerated, but I have, I think, good reasons to say that these books actually changed my life in one way or another, without any exaggeration. So I'm just excited to share some of my story, and then at the end I'll maybe share some honorable mentions. Um, I will start in chronological order, so these are not ranked in any other way. And yeah, let's just start. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Alchemist by not Paulo Coelho, but Michael Scott. And this is the first book in the Secrets of the Immortal Nicolas Flamel series. This is a middle grade fantasy series, and I think just as other people read The Lightning Thief, or Percy Jackson, or even Harry Potter as they were kids, and that was their introduction to fantasy and reading, this is that series for me. And so this really kickstarted my passion for reading. I had read other books in the past, like City of the Beasts by Isabel Allende, Ciudad de las Bestias. That trilogy was also very formative in my early reading years, but I think this series, The Alchemist, or the start of the series is called The Alchemist, really captivated my imagination, my fascination for storytelling at a young age. The story follows two twin brothers, Sophie and Josh Newman, in their crazy adventure around the world, um, as they get wrapped in this epic battle between good and evil. They are actually chosen ones, so this is the chosen one trope, but you have two chosen people around this prophecy where one of the twins is supposed to save the world, whereas the other is supposed to destroy it. So it is a very interesting twist on that trope, and the story has these mythological creatures and historical figures from all around the world, and they live among us. So it also has this trope of gods among us, I think it's called. And it was so fun as a young boy to just read about other cultures and other mythologies, because every time there was a new creature, I would just like Google so much about it. So I became a walking encyclopedia on like different mythologies and histories. So that was really fun. And the second thing, actually, so this series has two things. So the first one was that it kickstarted my reading career, I guess, as a young boy. But also, halfway through the series, I started reading it in English, and that's when I actually started reading most of my books in English, which I think was a big reason why I improved my language skills, or at least my English, from a very young age. And obviously, reading gave me so much vocabulary, and just being exposed to that language, I think, had a big impact in me learning that quite quickly, quite young. So I remember I would sit in this armchair at home with a dictionary by my side, and at the start, I would literally just have to translate like every other word. And I even had notes in my this is so funny. I even had notes in my iPod where I would like put the like a word that was repeated quite a lot, and I would write the definition. So I had my own personal like dictionary. Um, Maybe that exists somewhere. But anyways, so that book really influenced me. I love this series. I actually reread it, or at least the first book, earlier this year. Maybe it was the first book that I read in January, and I think it still holds up. So I would really recommend this to readers that are wanting to start a reading journey in fantasy. So if you have young people in your life that you think could be interested in this, as I said, there is some urban fantasy because you have two kids in the modern age, but they are in this magical legendary fight uh, in our world. So there's also a lot of like traveling. If you have an interest for historical figures, you might see some of them pop up, like Shakespeare or uh, Gilgamesh, for instance. And I think the story does a good job at having a good mix of cultures, even though the author is Irish, and there is a lot of like Western culture in the story, but you have characters from South America, from Asia, even a couple of gods and goddesses and creatures from Africa. So I think it feels very global in a way, and it's just so cozy and so fun. So yeah, this is definitely a recommendation for middle grade readers. The second book that I want to talk about today is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. And this is actually one of my favorite books of all time. It impacted me so much. I remember I found this book through a cousin that also is a big reader, and she had been reading this story and she told me the concept, and I was like fascinated. And then I tried reading it and I couldn't understand a thing, so I had to drop it, and I came back to it many years later. This story is actually a story about stories, and you follow six stories that go all the way back to the, I don't know, 1400s maybe, and then each subsequent story goes further and further in the future, and all the way into like the far future and the post-apocalyptic future. And these six stories are interconnected in very subtle ways. And what's fascinating about this story, or at least the narrative format, is that you read half of each story first. So you read like the first story, that's the oldest one in time, and then the next you read half of it, and then I wouldn't say like you stop at a cliffhanger, but you don't get the wrap up of that story, and then you start the next one, and you go all the way into the future, and then you start closing the stories backwards. So you read books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Um, so you read them backwards in the second half. And each of these stories is told in a very different format. Some of them are more comedic, some of them are more like historical fiction or like detective, sci-fi. So you have a combination of genres and a combination of characters with very different struggles in life and different motivations. Um, but I think this story really impacted me because it was the first a speculative work of fiction that made me go into like reading as an adult. And I have been reading a lot of other middle grade and YA at the time, and I really liked it. But I think this was the first book that really opened my mind to the power of storytelling beyond just like a fun adventure or a fun story, because this novel talks so much about the interconnectivity of human beings and how we are all connected in ways that maybe are hard to understand, and this idea that a small action can have major repercussions in someone else's life. And this theme of connection really impacted me at that time in my life. And I think all of the stories that I consume at that age and that became favorites have to do with this idea of how humans are connected in powerful ways that maybe are not logical or hard, yeah, just hard to understand, even metaphysical. I think I was just craving for this connection and this feeling that we're all part of something bigger. And this is something that started for sure in Cloud Atlas. I've reread this story many times, and I find so much joy in all of them. There is actually a movie adaptation by the Wachowski sisters, which is also quite cool. I think it elevates the story uh, through the visual format. So I think it's a wonderful adaptation. It makes this interconnectedness a bit more explicit than the books, I would say. So that is just a more explicit, I guess, interpretation. But it's fascinating. It's so fun. Um, yeah, Cloud Atlas. What can I say? This is a story that I think will follow me forever, and I'm so grateful for my cousin Paulette, if you ever watch this. And as I said, this book really showed me the power of fiction to change your life beyond the pages in a very conscious way. Because the first book got me into the habit of reading. The first book that I talked about, The Alchemist, got me into this habit of reading, and it was very subconsciously changing my habits and my day-to-day life. But I was still very young and I was not thinking so much about it. It's more like in retrospective that I can talk about it. Whereas Cloud Atlas really kind of in that time, I felt like the impact of the story hit me in a more like in a deeply emotional way, I think for the first time as a young adult. And that was so beautiful. And again, some of my favorite movies and stories today have to do with this theme. So I would really, really recommend Cloud Atlas if you're looking for a speculative work about human nature, about relationships and destiny and what we do with that or not. The third book that I will talk about is Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson. This is the third book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, a high epic adult fantasy series about people and empires and loyalty and love and friendship, family relationships, brotherhood. Like it's honestly about so much. I mean, it's a quite long series, so it manages to touch on so many topics. This is the third book that I am referring to, and I will not spoil any plot points, but I will talk a bit more about the thematic elements of this story. If you know anything about Malazan, you probably know two things: that it's very complicated and that it mostly talks about compassion. I think these are two things that most people that haven't read it have heard at least. And I think they're true to some extent. I think there's a lot more happening in this story thematically. And I wouldn't say it's as hard as I think people make it more intimidating than it is. But the third book is definitely where you really start seeing this theme of compassion grow, and it's interesting because I mean it's a really good story, but there is this one moment towards the end of the book that just really hit me in a very, very deep emotional level. You have a character that has these really big moments of forgiveness, and they have these moments at a time where it is not convenient to be compassionate towards this other group of people, and it's almost detrimental. I mean, you have this climax, and there is so much that is happening. There are lives at stake, and this character decides to forgive and to absolve and to like be compassionate, even though it's not the practical thing to do. It's not the smart thing to do. Oh, an ant. It's actually like strategically or for the army, a very dumb decision. But it's just the right thing to do. And there is this beautiful, beautiful quote that compassion needs to be given freely, and that I think has been with me since I read it. And Malazan has this capacity to have moments that just impact you in a way that you will never look at life in a different way, I think. And I know that sounds very exaggerated, but I think this moment is one of those to me and the most impactful, at least for me. And I think this idea of just doing the right thing, even when it's not practical, even when it's not convenient, um, just sticking to what's true and what's good. And obviously, there is so much that you can discuss about morality and ethics just around that. And everyone has different definitions of what that might be. But I don't know. I think that moment just hit me differently. And I think I've tried to apply that to my everyday life. I'm not great at it all the time, but this forgiveness and this unconditional compassion towards other human beings, no matter the moments, the consequences of that, I think it's a very powerful message, and one that I again try to apply to my everyday life and in my relationship to others. And this is something that had never happened to me previously with a book. Like that one line changed the way that I behave consciously. And so I have Malasan to thank for that. And there are other moments like that in the story, but I think this is the one that just like is imprinted in my memory and in my heart. And I hope that I can still be an example of that, and I still can do that in my day-to-day life. Yeah, so thanks for listening. This has been a very personal video, and I'm not saying that these books will change your life in the same way that it did to me. I think they were just the books that I read at the right time, and that had the right impact on me. I hope you find something interesting in these, or at least I'm just sharing some books that have a special place in my heart. So I hope you like this video, and yeah, let me know what you think about these outdoors vibe. I think I think there's such a poetic thing in talking about stories and books in a forest, because I mean paper comes from trees, and I've always thought that because trees live so long and there's trees that are like thousands of years old, they have seen so much, and they have experienced so much history, and so many like stories have happened around them. So I don't know, I think I cannot put it into words, I'm not a poet, but I think there's like something there with like stories like in the leaves and like stories in the trees. And I don't know, I think I would try to shift my content to be a bit more like this forest cozy vibe, even though it's gonna get cold pretty quickly. But I think it could be fun to have like a channel rebranding where I talk about books in this natural environment. I mean, I love being outdoors, so I think it fits me really well, and it's very unique. I don't see anyone else doing that, so I think it would be like my own personal branding. So let's see how it goes. Let me know if you like that. And yeah, thank you for listening and have a great day. Bye bye.